Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2006's The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, the Nintendo GameCube adventure that also became a Wii launch title, causing a mirrored game world as a result of right-handed motion control.
Following that is Nintendo's second journey into the realm of fitness, this time in the form of an RPG that you play by exercising, 2019's Ring Fit Adventure.
Finally talking about Twilight Princess here, and it's interesting to have you bring Ring Fit Adventure to the show, because that is a stealthy, sneaky good soundtrack, by the way.
It is one of those that's like punching far above its weight class.
Yeah, always impressive when that happens. But the theme between the two games this week is new methods of motion control, whether it was the onset of the Wii and its remote, or the Ring-Con, is that what it's called?
Yes, it is called the Ring-Con.
Yeah, putting your Joy-Cons in a stretchy ring exercise band. Should be interesting to compare these two games in that way, but also their soundtracks as well. Joe, how are you doing this week? What are you playing?
Boy, I burnt through a lot of video game since the last time we talked. I'm in one of those, parts of my life where suddenly all I want to do is finish games. That's all I want to do. I'm going to finish games. So I finished Danganronpa since last time.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
All the listeners need to know is that I am a genius, but only in one specific area. Other than that, though, yeah, it's pretty good. I still think I'm going to wait for a Switch port to play 2. I'm definitely going to wait for Switchport to play V3. 100%.
Yeah, I think that's probably for the best. It really is a game that shines portably, especially if you like to have a game before bed. I mean, it's perfect for that.
Mm-hmm. I also finished Child of Light. That game was pretty neat. Nice little sort of quote-unquote pocket-sized RPG. Had a lot of fun. And I'm hopefully going to be talking about that later this year. And then I played a game called Last Stop that came out last week. It is a game that was published by Annapurna that is it's these 3 stories with supernatural elements that then sort of intertwine near the end. It's fine. It's got good characters and I like the story that they're telling, but the gameplay is, imagine a Telltale game, but less gameplay. I don't know if I'd recommend it to somebody who was looking for a lot of engagement, but I mean, it's there and I enjoyed it.
And it's on Game Pass, right?
I think so. Yes,
yeah.
It is. That's how I played it. I played it on Game Pass. What am I talking about? And I also played the first part of Case 1 in Great Ace Attorney. We're doing that on stream, so I can't play it at my leisure quite yet, but it's a long case for being the first case of an Ace Attorney game. Really long. And of course, I played the first 2 hours of Neo The World Ends With You. And it's pretty good.
You have definitely been busy. I'm impressed. I have hardly been playing any games. But to follow up on news from last week, my fiance and I have been accepted to build a new house.
Woo!
We won a bid on a lot. It was crazy. It's a whole lot of stress, real adult things, so I think video games can take a back burner, and it'll be interesting to see what happens for the rest of 2021, because money needs to be saved.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, real life things aside, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. We like to talk about the composers we've talked about on this show, see what they're doing today, how it intersects with news from the video game industry. And boy, Joe, I don't think there's any bigger crossover between our niche interest of video game music crossing over with real world, real life activities then video game music playing during the opening March of Nations at the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games. These, were going to be the ones that were in 2020, now 2021 in Tokyo, and a whole bunch of video game music looped on a medley. Some highlights from games or franchises we've talked about include Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts with the perfect choice of Olympus Coliseum.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Chrono Trigger, Sonic the Hedgehog, Soul Calibur, and probably my favorite inclusion, Song of the Ancients from Nier. So Amy Evans, the vocalist, got to have her voice, in a way, help introduce the athletes from different nations. It's just amazing.
Which, to be fair, a lot of people pointed out that it's really, really surreal to hear music from Nier play over an Olympic Games that, let's be real, probably shouldn't be happening.
Mm-hmm.
When Nier is a game about a post-apocalyptic world after mankind was wiped out by a pandemic. Little on the nose there.
Yeah, and there was also a report that just recently came out as of time of recording that Nintendo was supposed to be included in the opening ceremonies, especially after at Rio at the closing ceremonies. Shinzo Abe, the Japanese prime minister at the time, appeared out of a warp pipe. And it's like, oh, Japan, we're coming to you next for the Summer Games. But Nintendo withdrew their inclusion in the opening ceremony supposedly last minute. A leaked document reportedly had music from Super Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Kirby, and Pokemon included, and also more warp pipe stuff with like Lady Gaga and all. It's a pretty unpopular Olympics apparently at the moment in Japan. Like, it was polled at like 80% disapproval, especially during this pandemic that is hitting Japan rather hard, and like they haven't really recovered much from it. So I think Nintendo was just like, yeah, we're kind of kings here in Japan in the video game industry, and we don't want to be associated with this unpopular thing.
And seemingly Square Enix said, you can have literally anything you want. Because, wow, there's a lot of Square Enix on that set list.
Including Dragon Quest music.
Unfortunately. I mean, it's really cool that those songs were there, but it's sort of underpinned by that feeling of like, oh, maybe we should have just canceled the Olympics this time. It would have been fine. Too Mellow, who we talked about a couple weeks ago for his work on Later Alligator, he's releasing his next album on August 24th, and it's Sounds of Tokyo To Future, which is the follow-up to his previous album, Memories of Tokyo To, which is a very, very good album, and I'm super pumped to hear what he does with this one. I'm very excited.
Yeah, Jet Set Radio cover music.
More Jet Set Radio inspired music. The
right.
vibe it sort of has is it's like, here's what I think a new Jet Set Radio would sound like.
Okay. Yeah, and he was definitely a fascinating subject to cover for that Later Alligator episode, so definitely will check that out. Meanwhile, Christina V is among the many, many voices that are featured in Neo, The World Ends With You, which you just started playing. That game is out now, and that game has music from Takeharu Ishimoto.
It's so good, too, so far. Oh, every song I've heard has been a jam.
Perfect. Also out now, The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, as you mentioned, and that has music from Yasumasa Kitagawa, who we covered on our Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney Phoenix Wright episode.
Yeah, it's that is also super good so far, though. I haven't heard a ton of it because, again, we only played the first part of 3 parts of the opening case of the first game. That part 1 took us 2 hours, by the way. So, beefy thing. So, this isn't really related to music per se, but we are a video game show and we talk about video games because we consume video game media quite often, and it's impossible to stay away from the news story that the state of California is suing Activision Blizzard because their workplace is so hostile and exclusionary to mostly women, but especially women of color. And so that's been a whole thing, including 3 different parts of this company coming out with vastly different statements. One saying like, none of this ever happened and California just has it in for us. And another one saying, oh, well, if it did happen, we're sorry, but we're pretty sure it didn't.
And then the stock price dropped.
Yeah, then the stock price dropped. And at time of recording, also, the response by the company has been heavily criticized by the people that work for it in a letter where I think at this point it's over 2,000 names have been signed on it. And they're also now basically on strike at time of recording. And honestly, I kind of hope they're still on strike by the time you hear this, because the last thing we want to do is have them back down from this. And the reason we're bringing it up is because, man, we can't not mention it. And I think I speak for both of us when I say, you know, solidarity on this. Unionize. Do it. This is the first step. If Activision Blizzard unionizes, that's the biggest domino that could possibly fall currently. So, fingers crossed. Good luck to all the employees out there trying to make the industry a better place. I really hope this is the time this time.
I completely agree. This is something that needs to happen, and you see the solidarity around the industry and hope it actually materializes into something good. Well, I don't know how to transition from that, honestly. You know, serious news stories and all, but it's definitely worth mentioning. So let's talk about the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. It was only a few weeks ago that I talked about another Legend of Zelda game with Hyrule Warriors, but here we are. So we need to cover Twilight Princess. Here we go. Twilight Princess.
Sometimes you just got to talk about Zelda.
You know, it's true, and it's, you know, games we love, and it's important to talk about them. I would be here forever if I listed all the episodes that we've talked about The Legend of Zelda in, but trust me, it's been a lot. So Twilight Princess released as a launch title for Nintendo Wii. That would be November 19th, 2006 in North America, December 2nd in Japan, the 7th in Australia, and the 8th in Europe. A version was also released for its intended system during development, the previous Nintendo system, the GameCube, and this version launched in December 2006. This was after its Wii version release in all regions except Japan, which got the game the same day. Wii and GameCube released on the same day at the same time. Then Wii U would get a remastered version of the game, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD, which was developed by Tantalus Media, and that released in March 2016. That had the Wolf Link amiibo and all that good stuff. It was a pretty good port. The original game was developed by Nintendo EAD and published by Nintendo. It is a third-person 3D action-adventure game, very similar to the 3D Zelda games at the time. So, with Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, very similar in that regard, where gameplay involves a blend of combat, exploration, and puzzles involving the use of different items. What's new to this game is basic motion control from the brand new Wii Remote. So that's whether you're swinging a sword. Granted, not one-to-one, just move it and a sword will be swung. Also, you can aim a bow and arrow, kind of aim the pointer at the screen to shoot claw shots or things like that. Just simple motion control. And obviously, this wasn't in the GameCube version. It was Wii exclusive for that motion control. Also new is Link's ability to turn into a wolf to solve a variety of puzzles with the help of his imp partner, Midna. So, the story of Twilight Princess involves a youth named Link, who works as a ranch hand in Ordon Village. One day, when monsters take away the village's children, Link pursues them and encounters a wall of twilight. A shadow beast pulls him beyond the wall and into the twilight-shrouded forest, where he is transformed into a wolf and imprisoned. Link is soon freed by a Twilight creature named Midna, who offers to help him if he obeys her unconditionally. She guides him to Princess Zelda, who explains that Zant, the king of the Twilight, invaded Hyrule Castle and forced her to surrender. As a result, the kingdom became enveloped in twilight, turning all of the inhabitants in affected areas into spirits. To save Hyrule, Link, aided by Midna, must first revive the light spirits by entering the twilight-covered regions and recovering the spirits' light from the twilight beings that had stolen it. Once revitalized, each spirit turns Link back into his Hylian form and informs Link and Midna of the hidden location of a fused shadow, one of the fragments of a powerful dark relic that will have to be used to match Zant's power to defeat him. Can Link and Midna defeat Zant and free Hyrule from being covered in twilight? What other dark plots are lurking behind the scenes? And who is the Twilight Princess? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess?
I have only played Twilight Princess once. I played the GameCube version because my roommate owned a copy and I was too lazy to go look for the Wii version. And also, people had told me back then that the Wii version wasn't nearly as good. I can't speak to that. I don't know. But I came away from it being really lukewarm on it. And nowadays, I'm pretty sure a lot of that was caused by the fact that I finished Wind Waker and then 2 hours later started Twilight Princess. And I don't think I'd given Wind Waker enough time to sort of sit. And so I found a lot of stuff about Twilight Princess kind of frustrating, not the least of which I'm sure I'll still find frustrating when we get to it for Masterpieces. Horseback combat. Has there ever been a single game that's done it well? I can't think of one, even today.
No.
It is super frustrating, and luckily it doesn't happen that often, even though part of the final boss is. But, you know, I really like Midna. I like the sort of art style and the aesthetic around Twilight Princess, though I think they go a little too far in the, this isn't your dad's Legend of Zelda. This is your mom's Legend of Zelda. We're doing... They really wanted to make Majora's Mask happen again, and I don't think they quite nailed it. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a Zelda game. How bad can a Zelda game be? Just kidding. There are multiple bad Zelda games, but, like, you get what I mean. It's like a main series Zelda game, and so at the end of the day, it's still good. And I'm honestly looking forward to playing it for Masterpieces.
Yeah, who will be the character for that one?
That is, I believe, Ganondorf.
Okay, that makes sense, I suppose. You're right, though. At the very least, a 3D traditional classic mainline Zelda game is that going to be at the very least good. How fondly do people remember it? How do they rank it over the others? I think that's, subject to debate. I remember Twilight Princess very fondly because for me, having a Wii as the first game console I owned by myself in college, and then Twilight Princess being like the first big game. Of course, everyone played Wii Sports, right, on their Wii, especially at launch. But for it to be like the first big campaign I played, I have it in a special place in my heart. And even though, I had a GameCube with my brother, before college, never really got into Wind Waker at the time then. So I had done Ocarina of Time on like a PC emulator and things like that. So I had that experience and knowledge going into it. But Twilight Princess was, an important game for me at like a really pivotal time in like appreciating and understanding video games. And so I always have, fond memories of it, especially characters like Midna. You're absolutely right. One of the better sidekicks that Link has had in an adventure.
I don't even know if I'd say one of the better. She is the best, in my opinion.
I was just, kind of providing that caveat in case I was, forgetting anyone. But yeah, she's definitely up there. And does it take inspiration from certain games, yeah, obviously the Ocarina of Time influences are strong. Something they wanted to get back to after Wind Waker, and we'll kind of talk about that very, very shortly here. But it's a game I've played multiple times, both on Wii and GameCube. And even then, when the HD version came out, played that one and loved it. It's just a great time. Probably a game I've played 5 to 6 times, if I had to guess. So, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess started its development in 2003, with the aim of launching on Nintendo GameCube. Internally, it was known as Wind Waker 2, and apparently this was divulged from producer and director Eiji Aonuma, kind of letting that slip unintentionally, because originally they wanted to reuse the cel-shaded graphics of Wind Waker. But then Nintendo of America informed the team that Wind Waker's sales were sluggish. They thought because its cartoon appearance created the impression that the game was designed for a young audience. So the shift was made to a more realistic look, and it was still using a modified Wind Waker engine. One of their first big aimed goals was horse combat and riding realism. You can kind of take it from there if you think that they were successful in that regard. The Lord of the Rings universe was also a big influence because they were popular films at the time. I mean, Return of the King was 2003. So it was kind of establishing a look for what a large fantasy open world could look like. The concept for Link to transform into a wolf and the surrounding narrative elements that came from that, it all came from a dream that Eiji Aonuma had while he was overseas on a business trip. He says he dreamt that he was a wolf, locked inside a cage, and after he woke up, he was confused and disoriented, and it took a while for him to remember where he was. Doing this allowed them also to play with the idea of two worlds, which is a popular concept with, the light and the dark world in Link to the Past, similar things like that in other Zelda games. So you had a world of light and a world of twilight that they also got to work with there. This led to an all-time video game reveal at E3 2004. They didn't show too much, but you kind of see some elements of Twilight Princess show up in this trailer. But, big dramatic fanfare, sword coming into the logo, and then the fade out to Shigeru Miyamoto with the Master Sword and the Hylian Shield, and the fanboys go wild and all that. It's a classic Nintendo moment, that E3 2004 trailer. Just an all-timer of a moment. But then Eiji Aonuma left the team with this idea of a wolf and two worlds and all that, and he went to finish producing the Minish Cap, which would launch on Game Boy Advance. This is kind of around 2004, so DS just beginning to be a thing, but released Minish Cap on Game Boy Advance, and then he returned to find the Twilight Princess team struggling. He also felt that the gameplay was lacking a caliber of innovation that was found in the also in development Phantom Hourglass, which was developed with touch controls for Nintendo DS.
Sure was.
But along came a revolution with a motion controller that would be suitable for, say, aiming arrows at the TV. So they decided to make a Nintendo Wii version, which was codenamed Revolution at the time, and they would develop these versions in parallel. But doing so would push the planned 2005 release date back. Eventual playtest feedback made it apparent to the team that they were forcing Wii controls on players instead of making them intuitive. For example, sword swings were still originally assigned to a button on this motion controller. So, okay, these would instead be transferred to motion gestures. But then this introduced the problem of a traditionally left-handed Link swinging with players holding the Wii Remote often in their right hand. And so they had to launch this game soon. They didn't want to delay it even more. They just didn't have enough time before release to rework Link's character model. So they instead flipped the entire game left to right. They mirrored the entire game world so that for the Wii version, Link was now right-handed, and references to East and West were switched around. So, if you played the Wii version, you may remember that the world of Eldin is in the West. Well, it's in the East in the GameCube version, because this GameCube version kept its original orientation, and this would then transfer into the future HD remaster. So I think it's just a fascinating example of how you change platforms, and I don't know of any other game that it's like, we're just going to mirror our entire world for this other version. It kind of makes it feel a little fresh when you go and play both versions.
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of another game that would have approached it that way either, though it's really funny to me thinking about like Aonuma in an office looking at a computer and he just hits Shift H, which is just an auto flip horizontal button. Like, he's like, all right, put it on the discs.
And then we got to go through the entire script.
Can you imagine if they missed just one of those?
Oh, yeah. No, it would be
have been disastrous.
Especially at a time where there aren't patches and things like that. Oh my gosh, crazy. We talked about how Midna is just a delight of a companion for Link. And she has this on-screen dialogue, that kind of counters the game's lack of voice acting. And she has this babble of pseudo-speech, which was produced by scrambling English phrases that were sampled by Japanese voice actress Akiko Komoto.
I didn't know those were actual real words being said.
They are, and it's really interesting to hear like the original samples because people could like unscramble them into the phrases. It's super, super cool. But then they launched the game, especially on Nintendo Wii, and fans discovered a buffer overflow vulnerability in the Wii version of Twilight Princess.
Oh, yes. Oh, I remember this actually.
And this exploit would become known as the Twilight hack, which allowed custom code to be loaded into the Wii off of an SD card. Thus began the possibility of installing custom homebrew applications on Nintendo Wii. Did you want to put emulators on your Wii? The Twilight hack would be how you would do it in the early days. Again, when you didn't really have patches in the Nintendo Wii days, this could not be fixed easily.
Though, like, right away, though, from a launch title, that is rough.
Yeah, and then, 3DS had a similar one with, like, another launch game that nobody really cared about, but then got really bad. So
I think it was, like, Steel Diver, wasn't it? I don't remember.
Something like that, and I think there was another one. But yeah, no, so that's... Nintendo fans are, I guess, diligent during those days in that regard. The game reviewed exceptionally well at the time, though, and this is I had kind of forgotten, honestly, with Metacritic scores of 95 on Wii and 96 on GameCube. It was the highest rated game of 2006. The game was praised for its world design, its art direction, and its departure in tone from the other games in the franchise, though it would be criticized for, quote, no voice acting, no orchestral score, and slightly outdated graphics.
I'll be fair, like, I think visually Twilight Princess is the GameCube Zelda that has aged the least well.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what happens when you go for a more realistic art style. There's no way around that. That's gonna happen all the time. What can you do?
Yeah, but I think, when you look at the HD version, that polished up surprisingly nicely, I think. Also, the motion controls had a wide range of opinions. Some really loved it. Some thought it was just tacked on and not really worth playing. So, it's beginning days of the Wii. That's what it is.
The perfect prologue to Skyward Sword and how that game would be received.
Yeah, I think so. Twilight Princess was incredibly popular, especially as a Wii launch title, though. During its first week, the game was sold with 3 of every 4 Wii purchases. As of September 2015, the game had sold 8.85 million copies worldwide across both Wii and GameCube. If you want to know the split, the Wii had 7.53 million and the GameCube 1.32 million. This would make it, at the time, the best-selling game in the series until Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild surpassed it. Twilight Princess is the 13th best-selling Wii game of all time, and the HD version sold about 1.13 million units on Wii U, making it the 19th best-selling game there. It was nominated for 7 awards at the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences Awards, that's the awards we now know as the DICE Awards, including Best Overall Game, but it won Outstanding Achievement in Story and Character Development. It was nominated for Best Action Adventure Game, Gameplay, and Original Score at the BAFTAs, and it received Game of the Year awards from many outlets like Game Trailers, OneUp.com, EGM, Game Informer, Games Radar, GameSpy, the Spezia Awards, X-Play, and of course, Nintendo Power.
What the hell are the Spacey Awards?
I don't know, throw it in another, we've never heard of this before, but they apparently give game awards. Twilight Princess's legacy includes a game that would be released in the next year on Wii, and that would be Link's Crossbow Training, which released alongside the Wii Zapper peripheral. Yeah, Link's Crossbow Training. I'd forgotten about that.
I did too.
Of course, we would get another Zelda game, and that would be the aforementioned Skyward Sword in 2011. Twilight Princess HD for Wii U again launched in 2016, along with My Nintendo Picross, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. This is a 3DS game that, was kind of released alongside the announcement of My Nintendo. So, yeah, a little Twilight Princess connection there. Twilight Princess character designs and stages were introduced into Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so a new look for Link, a new look for Ganondorf. You had the Bridge of Eldin stage. Things like that. Zelda's look also. So that became kind of a foundation for those characters for a while until Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And as we mentioned a few weeks ago in Hyrule Warriors, Midna, Agatha, and Zant are playable characters in that game.
And Agatha is the most bizarre inclusion in the entire thing. Bar none, I think.
Yeah, she's such a minor character in Twilight Princess for a side quest that they're like, nope, let's give her main character or main antagonist status. It's like, what?
It's time for bugs.
Apparently. We're still waiting on the possibility of Twilight Princess HD coming to Nintendo Switch. It's surprising that it has not happened or been announced already, but I think they want to give Skyward Sword some time to shine, if I had to guess, because of its possible relevance to a Breath of the Wild sequel. But I think hopefully maybe we'll see Twilight Princess HD on the Switch at some point. That'd be really nice. So, for the composer for the soundtrack to The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, we've talked about Toru Minegishi before. He's the lead composer on this game. We talked about him in when you covered Majora's Mask. And there is Asuka Ota, who also composed on the soundtrack. She's known today as Asuka Hayazaki, and you'll hear that name later in the show. But we're kind of saving her for other Nintendo games, because she has her fingers, her reach in a whole bunch of different Nintendo games. Don't want to use coverage of her up just yet, although I'm surprised. I honestly thought we had talked about Asuka Ota before.
Yeah, same. I also thought that.
Yeah. So instead, let's talk about Michiru Oshima. And I think Michiru Oshima has a really interesting involvement in Twilight Princess here, but also just a fascinating individual to cover. A name I did not know, honestly, but I'm really glad that I did get to research Ms. Oshima. So Michiru Oshima was born March 16th, 1961 in Nagasaki Prefecture in Japan. According to VGMDB, she's also sometimes credited by the alias Hibiki Miwa, but Oshima has had music be a part of her life since age 3 with music lessons. And also audiovisual media has also been just a big part of her life from an early age because her father worked at a Japanese TV station. So she'd go and visit him and see what his work was all about. She was also inspired at a young age from a lot of music from Disney, as well as soundtracks from Akira Kurosawa films. She also says, quote, I love British rock music. I love Genesis, Peter Gabriel, and Sting, and of course, the Beatles. And so this interest in music from an early age led her to becoming the youngest person to be awarded the first prize at the International Electone Festival in 1977, when she was 16 years old. You know what? I'm going to count it. I'm going to say that she must have learned Electone at that point. You know, we've got...
I mean, if she got first place at an Electone festival, I think it's very easy to take that as an implication that she learned how to play the Electone.
Yeah, we'd never heard of the Electone before starting this show, and now it's like these Japanese composers learned on Electone, this electric piano. So she began composing and arranging music, though, when she was in college, and she was in the Department of Music Composition at the prestigious Kunitachi College of Music. She also released her first symphony, entitled Orasho, when she was still in college. And she started as a part-time worker working at a commercial music production company, and she says she just continued to be in the industry after that. She has written scores for over 100 movies, over 200 television titles, video games, various types of events, concerts, theaters, among others, and this has involved releasing over 300 CDs of her work. She was one of the 27 composers for the album in 27 pieces, the Hilary Hahn Encores, which was performed by violinist Hilary Hahn, and this was awarded a 2015 Grammy Award in the Best Chamber Music category. For what it's worth, the track she composed was titled Memories. She has also worked on Japanese government projects, specifically being the music director of the 40th anniversary of ASEAN, ASEAN, which is an acronym for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So, for this specific summit, she managed musicians from these countries, organized concerts, and composed the music that would be played at the ASEAN summit. Today, it seems like she's composing symphonies, concertos, and the like in Japan today. And you can follow her on Twitter at Oshima Michiru. Her discography is really interesting. A lot of titles are Japanese films, anime, ones that I've hardly or never heard of, but certain ones stood out. In particular, Michiru Oshima is most known on the internet for being a composer for the Godzilla films, specifically the Tezuka-directed ones of the early 2000s. These would be versus Megaguirus, against Mechagodzilla, and Tokyo SOS. She also composed music for Tsubaki Sanjuro, which was an adaptation of Kurosawa's 1962 film Sanjuro. So that's really cool that she got to compose music for a take on one of her, idols, I guess, in a way, growing up. That's super neat, I thought. For anime projects, she composed for the 2003 tokusatsu series Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, which I had to pass along to you. I'm like, do you know that this thing exists?
Oh, yeah.
A tokusatsu of Sailor Moon with live action actors and then a whole bunch of special effects added on top of it?
Oh, yeah. I've seen screenshots of this show, and it looks really weird. And one day I am going to watch it because it looks delightful. If you've never seen, you should follow Sailor Moon live tweets on Twitter, where I guess she did an entire live tweet of watching the whole series. It's so weird looking, but I'm shocked that it shows up on this show at any point.
Yeah, me too, to be honest. I had no idea that was a thing. In the anime world, though, I would say she is most well known for composing the score to the 2003 Full Metal Alchemist series. She also composed for the Conqueror of Shambhala film for Full Metal Alchemist. FMA 2003 may have those who like it more than Brotherhood, those who may not like it more than Brotherhood, but I think the score is a place where the original series shines through. You listen to the track Brothers or Kyodai, that's the staple track from that show, and that show's I think like a perfect example of Oshima's composition. Just fantastic. She also composed for The Tatami Galaxy.
Yeah.
And Little Witch Academia. Those were pretty much the only other titles I could recognize.
Tatami Galaxy is really good. If you haven't watched it, people, you should go watch it.
I thought you might get a kick out of that one. I do remember that name from you specifically, actually. As far as games go, she's composed for Legend of Legaia and Legaia 2 Dual Saga. She was the main composer for Ico?
Oh.
Like, wow. Another classic video game score before Shadow of the Colossus, but Ico. Okay. And then she did arrangements on The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. So let's get to talking about that historical development research for the game. The Twilight Princess score was composed by Toru Minigishi and Asuka Ota, with series regular Koji Kondo serving as the sound supervisor. Now, Mahito Yokota, who we've covered for his work on Super Mario 3D World, also Super Mario Galaxy was a big game from him. Yokota and Koji Kondo composed 3 orchestral pieces for the game's trailers, and these were arranged by Michiru Oshima. So, I think that is a cool way to kind of bring in a legend, honestly, of Japanese composition, and it's a really neat thing, because Kondo originally envisioned a full 50-person orchestra for the action sequences in Twilight Princess, and a string quartet for more lyrical moments. But the final product used sequenced music instead. Twilight Princess would not be the first Nintendo game to use a full orchestrated soundtrack. Kondo would later cite the lack of interactivity that would come with orchestral music, especially at the time, as one of the main reasons for this decision. And while I think the instrument quality suffers, granted you're using really good MIDI quality at the time, but it's not the same as full orchestration. Though I will give him that, the whole idea of the interactivity. It is really neat in Twilight Princess when different moments happen, like say during a boss fight. You're trying to find a way to damage the boss, and you've done so, and now the boss is vulnerable, and you're free to strike it and wail on it. Well, the music changes at the right moment to fit the tone, and I think, moments like that are really cool, and they shine in Twilight Princess. It's just that the music instrument quality suffers a little bit as a result.
And nowadays they can do that with live instruments.
Right.
But at this point in time, sort of bringing a whole orchestra in to do the music of a game was not even just with Nintendo. It was a new idea. It wasn't really done like a huge amount. I think like maybe Halo was like the big name that was doing that at this point in time.
Right, and you'd have, Shadow of the Colossus, too, in 2005. Yeah. But, for also, like, a game of this size, like a big adventure of this size. Like, the Twilight Princess soundtrack is huge. And just to imagine, like, an orchestra doing all of that. There's also so much space on a GameCube mini disc. Like, 1.5 gigabytes? Like, there's only so much that you could do. And granted, Wii's DVD would allow for more space, but certain constraints at the time. So I think it's just one of those last big Nintendo adventures before they went to the full orchestration in Super Mario Galaxy. So then let's get to hearing about what this music sounds like, and we'll do so in the 5 critical tracks. We start with an odd one, and this is Twilight. No, not like the movie franchise or the books. So, Twilight in this case plays in the Twilight world. And so it's this new environment that Link has to navigate as a wolf. And it's just this deeply unsettling piece with these dissonant chords, these synth chords just making you feel really uneasy. There's kind of a melody run that kind of keeps the piece moving. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes you get little flute bits coming in with do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Almost kind of, I think, in a way, like emulating like the small solving chime in a way. That's kind of what I think about it anyway. But yeah, this piece certainly isn't a favorite of mine. It's not one like, yes, I remember this piece fondly in Twilight Princess. But I think it's a really important piece for Twilight Princess. Not only is it critical in the early game as far as what you're playing and how you're learning how to play, especially as a wolf, but it shows this darker tonal shift that the game represents. And yeah, so not the most, enjoyable piece to listen to, but an important one in the game, I think.
So this is my first time hearing this song in many years. When I played Twilight Princess, I had not played a different game, but now that I have, this is a Silent Hill 2 song.
Yeah.
Like the chord, the synth that's playing the chords in the clip, that is exactly one that Silent Hill 2 uses for a lot of its music. So like hearing this, I was like, oh, you could tell me that Yamaoka did parts of these and I would believe you. So by that logic, I really, really like the tone that this is setting down. Except then I remember that it plays during the Beads of Light sections of the game, and I hate those. I think they're actually super bad, but in terms of atmosphere, though, this song is really, really neat and totally different from anything you're going to hear even today anywhere in the Zelda series.
Yeah, or even through the rest of the game, right? I mean, granted, you may get like Twilight Battle when you're facing these shadow beasts as a wolf, and it's like, it's like a lot of these low, dissonant notes as well. But it really, sets that tone, and I think it's important to kind of show the variety of what's being covered here, because we're going to take a hard right and go back to the main light world. Number 2 on the Critical 5 here. This is Hyrule Field. So yes, this is the theme that plays on that main overworld, that big open world of Hyrule Field, specifically during the daytime. It has a nighttime variation as well. And it's just a classic theme for this game. Like, it has to be here in a Critical 5. I honestly think it's one of the best overworld themes in the whole series. That's just my take. It's so triumphant. It sounds so good. And I love how flexible and dynamic it is. We hear it, outside the clip, but, it can kind of take a low, more foreboding bit and then come back right in that triumphant bit. That's kind of what the dynamic shifting of the music would allow for it to be sequenced like this. And it's just, this part in particular in the clip is just so positive and so triumphant, makes you feel so good. Granted, the MIDI instruments at the time really shine with, strings and the brass and the driving percussion. Do they sound like live recorded instruments? No, not really, but honestly, that's pretty good quality. Though I think, if anything, the piece is like the prime example of how it's really a shame that it was not orchestrated, because it could have just sounded even better.
That being said, hey, they found a pretty alright trumpet MIDI.
Yeah.
As we all know, I'm a snob about that, and I think these are pretty good. I think this fights with Great Sea as my favorite overworld song, because I don't think anything in Skyward Sword beats it out. Obviously Breath of the Wild doesn't really have an overworld theme, because it's just not designed to be like that. So yeah, I'm lukewarm on Ocarina and very lukewarm on Majora's Field theme. So it comes down to those two, And depending on the day, I have a different answer. That being said, there are a lot more really, really good renditions of this song than there are Great Sea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how musicians have taken this theme and run with it since then is just fantastic. Just like another piece here on the Critical 5 that we had to include. This is Midna's Lament. Midna's Lament is occasionally also titled Midna's Desperate Hour, and in the game it comes at that classic after the 3 dungeons narrative shift in a traditional 3D Zelda game. After this point, Midna is not feeling very well, and you must carry her back to Hyrule Castle as a wolf to go see Princess Zelda. I think this is a section of the game that really narratively solidifies her as a character to care a lot about. And this piece, playing during that whole section, at least when it's not interrupted by battles, only further makes that connection, right? So, as we both have admitted, like, Midna is a fantastic character, and I feel like this theme is a result of that. It is a dazzlingly somber piano piece. And, the strings come in only to emphasize that even more. Joe, I know you love this piece, as you do with your piano pieces, but it's a special one for sure.
I think this is my favorite song of the game. It's just bar none. I adore this piece. I love that moment. It's one of the few moments in Twilight Princess that I remember vividly. This song is used to such great effect during that entire sequence. Yeah, this is one of those songs where you hear it and you're just like, I should learn how to play piano. I should learn how to play piano.
Absolutely. Kind of like a piece that might make you want to play the guitar. Number 4 on the Critical 5 for Twilight Princess. This is Hidden Village. The Hidden Village takes place in the game after the 7th dungeon, before the 8th. So before that City in the Sky dungeon, the main quest takes you to this Hidden Village area, where it's the last step in regaining your childhood friend Ilya's memory. And you get into this desolate town that has just been abandoned, ravaged. But here are some little moblins, or bulblins, or whatever they're called. And so these little enemies, there's like 20 of them, and this music plays. This whole like yeehaw feeling kind of piece as you have to go and eliminate these 20 enemies from the Hidden Village. Just root them out. That's what you got to do, because everyone's scared. What's that? It's only one person left in the town. But man, this piece really stands out as something different, something memorable. It's a great little main quest piece. And these acoustic guitars that play, you get the whistling that comes in, even these little twangy spaghetti western plucked strings, the whole bit. It just sets a mood as you're eradicating these enemies from this desolate town. It's just great.
I feel like we don't get to talk about the jaw harp nearly as much as we should on this show. But if Midna's Lament is like the most memorable sort of emotional beat the game has, Hidden Village just feels cool. The whole sequence, and this song is a huge part of it. There's when the Zelda reorchestrated project sort of ended because, Nintendo was now orchestrating them themselves. They were no longer needed. They released a big 3-disc album called Twilight Symphony, and their version of Hidden Village is absolutely incredible. That's mainly because the parts are here. It's such a cool feeling moment, which doesn't make sense when I think back to it, because it's just a town full of, like, the default enemies. There's nothing super cool happening, but, like, this Western feel of just pulling out your bow and sniping a bunch of moblins, bokoblins, those things.
Boblins, I think. Yeah.
I don't remember. I think you're right. But yeah, that entire section just feels really cool in a specific way you feel like you wouldn't expect from a Zelda game, to be honest.
Yeah, it just really stands out as a great moment. And now I feel really stupid for forgetting about Twilight Symphony existing. Don't worry, we'll still have a pretty cool piece in the transition, but definitely go check out Twilight Symphony. Oh my gosh. Number 5 on the Critical 5, wrapping things up. It's gotta be this one. This is Ganondorf. Occasionally, this is titled Dark Lord Ganondorf, and it plays during Phase 4 of the final boss fight, where it's a one-on-one sword fight with the Gerudo King himself, Ganondorf. Hey, use the fishing rod. If you pull out the fishing rod, you'll distract him and open him up for you to use your sword. Just a little tip if you're struggling with that one. That's just one of those little things like, oh, what's the distract Ganon item this time?
Which is a reference to how the bug net can be used to beat him in Link to the Past, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah, so it's a neat little thing there. I think this piece, though, is so cool. I do like Dark Beast Ganon a lot, but this one I feel like gives the proper bombast for a final encounter. You've got those deep chanting voices that kind of set the tribal rhythm of the piece, and then these thick brass chords come in. And I love, especially at the end of the clip here, how it mixes in that old Ganon theme. The da 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 da. Like, oh my gosh, like just brilliant stuff going on with this one. I feel like it's one of the better final boss encounters. Like, Wind Waker is also a great one, let's be real. Demise, not as much, but you're talking about at the time when you want that more realistic one-on-one showdown with Ganondorf. I mean, that's just a great one.
I don't even think I can remember how Demise's boss fight song sounds. Yeah, no, this, in terms of like gameplay, I like the Beast Ganon part the best.
Yes.
The phase 2, it's just super cool. And then of course, I've already mentioned that the phase 3 is one of the worst final bosses I've ever fought in a Zelda game. But yeah, this, when it comes to the music, this is the one that, this might be one of the coolest themes Ganon has ever had in anything. It's, those drums make it, man.
It's fantastic. And honestly, it's so tough to pick a critical 5 for Twilight Princess. But as a result, we have some tracks on the cutting room floor. And Joe, you have 2. Hit me with them.
So both of mine are very early tracks, which I guess shows that I'm a hack, but these are the ones I remember the most personally. The first one is Ordon Village. So obviously, Ordon Village is where you start the game. It's the starting town where Link lives and does sheep herding, I guess.
Goats!
Ah, yes, goats, where you gotta sometimes sumo the goats. I failed that first time every time I tried in my life. And I don't know, I always have a really soft spot for starting village music in Zelda games. Like, Kokiri Forest is such a nice little song. I guess technically Clock Town counts. Outset Island is one of my favorite songs on that soundtrack. And yeah, it's just nice and calming, and it's the calm before the storm. And I really, really dig that about this kind of piece, and this one specifically.
It's a long opening section, so you're going to get used to hearing it a lot. But it's a good thing it is so good. I mean, the little plucked strings, the kind of pan flute whistle, it's just, yeah, fantastic.
But then one that is basically just for me and no one else, Ook. Ook is the first dungeon's mini-boss. He is a baboon with the Gale Boomerang, which is the first sort of item that you get from a dungeon. And I don't know, I really, really, really dig this song a lot. The strings, the acoustic strings are fun. And it's not in the clip, but the it's just, I don't know what it is about this song, but it has stuck with me through all these years. And this is another one where go listen to the Twilight Symphony version, because it is really, really good, and it might actually be one of the reasons why this song has stuck with me for so long.
Yeah, this one was a choice, for sure. A weird mini-boss of rolling into the wood columns and have him fall over, and then you smack his booty. Smack his booty with your sword.
I mean, if you're gonna have a baboon in your game, you have to hit him in the butt. That's baboons' things.
Of course. I think you're right. The little bit of the like that's, yeah, something that has stuck with me a lot too. And I think it's notable that when you eventually fight Zant and he channels some of those past boss battles, it's that same little like that comes in.
Yeah, this is one of them. And it's super cool when it happens.
It's a great callback. It's a great moment. And I think, yeah, it's just a little earworm of a little melody that kind of sticks with us. A really cool Middle Eastern flair, too, especially in the clip. I mean, a lot of neat instruments coming in. Like it a lot, for sure. Oh, my tracks on the cutting room floor. Boy, oh boy. Well, let's get this first one out of the way. It is here. It is smart. It is time for Mallow Mart.
I love this song.
It's a great song. I almost didn't add it, but then, I just couldn't not. It is way too catchy and way too silly of a song. This plays in the Castletown branch of Mallow Mart, when Mallow has expanded his capitalist empire from the confines of Kakariko Village to big Hyrule Castle Town. What a weird piece! It sticks with you all over these years, that's for sure. A little da-da-da-da-da-da. And the Japanese salesman voice guy that comes in at the end. It's a weird one, for sure, but just way too infectious. It just had to be here, not in the Critical 5, that's for sure.
I have heard this song more times than literally any other song on this soundtrack that includes Midna's Lament, because YouTubers love to use Mallow Mart. Peanut Butter Gamer specifically has basically built a career on using Mallow Mart in his videos. I have never heard the Japanese salesman part. I do not know how I've never heard that part. It's always been the first part of the clip that I've heard. That sure is a thing. Wow. All right.
Yeah, it sure is. But the other one on the cutting room floor is an interesting choice as well, but I feel like it had to be for this episode here. This is Orchestra Piece 1. Orchestra piece number 1 was composed by Mahito Yokota and Koji Kondo, also arranged by Michiru Oshima, as we mentioned earlier, so I feel like this was an important one to include. This was the score that was used in the E3 2005 trailer. So not the big famous reveal at E3 2004, but the first trailer with actual substantial content from the actual game. And I feel like it's really memorable in that way. It's like our first real look at, a trailer intended to be Twilight Princess, not just the next Zelda concept. Watching this trailer again, the E3 2005 one, it's like, oh yeah, I remember weird shots from it, like Colin, the little blonde-haired boy, like making a purposeful shot of him crawling through a hole. It's like, oh yeah, to this big dramatic orchestral score.
Man, I forgot about Colin. I hate Colin.
Colin does suck.
We should have let him get kidnapped by the Bulbin.
Yeah, no kidding. But it's just an example of like, this is incredible orchestration from the master, that is Oshima. And, she did an amazing job with this one, with all of the other orchestra pieces that are on this soundtrack. But this one stands out the most to me. So what will I never forget about The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess? Well, I mean, as I mentioned before, it's, the first campaign that I played on a video game console that I owned all by myself. And so it's a game that sticks with me. Do I like Wind Waker more? Yes. I do like Twilight Princess, though, a lot. I don't know if I'd put it, the highest or even too highly on all the other great Zelda games that they're there, but I feel like I like it more than maybe most people do. I don't know.
I think of all the Zelda games on the Smasterpieces list, I'm most interested in how I'm going to feel about Twilight Princess when we get there. Because like I said earlier in the episode, like, I came away from Twilight Princess kind of not liking it all that much. And I do wonder if that's mostly because of just sort of burnout from going straight from Wind Waker into another Zelda game. But at the same time, I don't really remember any specific complaints I had or anything. So I think it's going to be really neat having, I want to say Twilight Princess was like my 4th Zelda game ever. And now that I've played a bunch of others since then, I'm wondering if my feelings on the game is going to change at all.
It's a lot of cool items in that one too. I mean, the spinner, I'm so sad I did not get to include the Stallord fight theme. It's just a great one for a boss fight there, but just, lost out to Mallow Mart. Sorry. But yeah, just great.
I remember Arbiter's Ground being like one of the best dungeons in the game. It's the only one I remember the name.
It is argued up there as one of the best dungeons that Zelda has ever had. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yep. But definitely a take on Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple. You definitely see the inspirations from there. Anyway, let's get to transitioning to the next game. Boy, we've talked about Twilight Princess a while, but you know what? It's a great game to talk about, and we'll see how much you have to talk about with your game, so it may just balance out here. Let's talk about Foulzee. Foulzee, Foulzee on YouTube, did a trap remix of Midna's Lament, which sounds interesting on its face, but then you actually get to listen to it, and he includes samples of Midna that have the voice unscrambled. And so you actually get to hear the phrases that were used from that Japanese voice actress in there. It's really neat. It sounds so good. It's a great theme to cover Midna's Lament. Go check out Zelda Reorchestrated. That Twilight Symphony album is fantastic, and I'm kicking myself for forgetting about it. But yes, please enjoy, and we'll be right back.
Have you made up your mind?
Hey, you! Get up out of your seat. It's time to move your body in exercise specifically, because we're talking about Ring Fit Adventure.
I don't want to move and exercise, though.
Yeah, me neither. So let's just talk about Ring Fit Adventure and not play it. So Ring Fit Adventure was originally released on October 18th, 2019 for the Nintendo Switch. It was developed by Nintendo EPD and published by Nintendo. It is an RPG that is played by exercising. The game ships with a leg strap and a ring con, as you mentioned near the beginning of the episode, both of which have built-in slots for one of the Switch's Joy-Cons. So I believe you put your leg strap on your right leg, and then you slip a Joy-Con in there, and then you put another Joy-Con into the ring con. The leg strap's just a leg strap. It just detects whether or not you are lifting your legs in any way, shape, or form. But then the ring con is actually kind of a cool piece of technology because it can detect not only movement using the Joy-Con's built-in gyro, but it can even detect when you are either pushing in on the ring or pulling out. And it's actually kind of a neat piece of technology. So when you are playing Ring Fit Adventure, there are turn-based battles where you attack by using various different exercise techniques. And the amount of reps you need to do each one is wholly dependent on your difficulty level, which I believe when you first load up the game, it'll give you a little quiz, it'll do some tests and be like, this is probably about where you should be. That's not new for Nintendo. We'll get into how this isn't the first time they've dipped their fingers in the fitness movement before. The attacks you can use are separated into 4 categories, being legs, noted by being blue, arms, which are red, core exercises, which are yellow, and yoga, which are green. And otherwise, you make progress through levels. It's almost kind of like a rail shooter. You start moving forward by jogging in place at various intensities. So, like, if you are running on, like, a conveyor belt or something, you're going to need to go faster. Let's say the conveyor belt is going against you. You're going to have to start running just a little bit faster to keep up. And sometimes you need to lift your knees higher in order to move well in places like if you step into a swamp or if you are walking upstairs. And those are the parts that my body hates the most. You can squeeze the ring con to either launch blasts of air in front of you, or you can point it downwards and do like a makeshift jump using the jet of air that it shoots out. And you can also stretch the ring con outwards to suck in coins and other items that are along the side of the level. Obviously, there's also a mode that lets you just do the exercises without the RPG stuff. And there's also various minigames that you can play through exercise. Most notably, in a free update in March of 2020, Nintendo added a rhythm game mode to Ring Fit Adventure that features not only music from the Ring Fit soundtrack, but from Super Mario Odyssey, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, and Wii Fit. And the story is as bare bones as it needs to be. One day, a young athlete stumbles upon a ring that beckons them to pull it apart, and when they do so, it releases the evil bodybuilding dragon Drago. The ring itself reveals that it is sentient and named Ring, because we gave up. Ring asks the young athlete to help them defeat Drago before his dark influence can harm the world. Can you defeat this toxic bro Drago? And how are you at doing squats? Those are basically the questions the story asks you. No others. So this is where I will ask Peter, what are your experiences with Ring Fit Adventure?
I remember being surprised and not all that surprised when Ring Fit Adventure and its Ring Con controller got announced seemingly out of nowhere. And then it's like, it's here. It's out now. And I was like, oh, okay. So they're trying the Wii Fit thing again, right? Probably something I should invest in and get, but I haven't. And honestly, I'm delighted to hear that the soundtrack is as good as it is. So good to have it on the show today.
I bought a copy of Ring Fit in December of 2020, and did the whole song and dance we're all used to, where in January of 2021, I said, I'm going to play Ring Fit 3 times a week. I'm going to do it. That lasted a week, and then I have not loaded up Ring Fit since. I really got to get back to it, especially now that I'm gaining weight at the speed that I am. I really should exercise more. That being said, though, Ring Fit's a really cool game, actually. I think it's a lot more interesting in its implementation than Wii Fit was.
Mm-hmm.
Where Wii Fit was basically a fancy scale that sometimes also let you slide as a penguin or something. I don't remember all the things that are in Wii Fit. I think this is genuinely a lot more interesting, though it's really weird for the gamer part of your brain to be playing this RPG and having to tell yourself, like, no, I play for 20 minutes and then we have to stop or I will die. Because that's when you're playing an RPG, that's not really the mindset you're in. It's, all right, I have like 6 hours. Let's do this. And if you do that with Ring Fit Adventure, you will not come out of it alive. Also, don't be like noted VTuber Gawargura, who decided on her first day of playing Ring Fit, oh, I'm gonna shove the difficulty up to 30. Which is the highest it goes. And then, like, we're pretty sure her manager had to be like, hey, don't do that again. Because at one point, her leg legit seemed to collapse from under her. It was a very stressful stream to watch. I love you, Gura. I'm glad you haven't streamed Ring Fit since then. Man, this was not the one where I expected to bring up VTubers. Anyways, there's nothing about this game's development. I'm sure if Satoru Iwata was still alive, there would be an Iwata Asks article about this game's development. But unfortunately nowadays, all Nintendo games fall into one of 2 categories. One is your Mario Odysseys or your Breath of the Wilds, where they release like art books and behind the scenes making of books and stuff that you can go find. Or they're like Ring Fit, where we are never going to hear anything about how this game was made ever. But generally, Ring Fit is considered to be a continuation of Nintendo's goal of getting players to engage in a more healthy, active lifestyle, which, as you might have guessed, started with 2007's Wii Fit. In fact, when Wii Fit was being developed, apparently they had talked about like, oh, think of the things we could do if the controller was smaller than the Wii remote. And allegedly, this is one of the reasons why the Joy-Cons are the size they are. It's not that there's no way it's the only reason. It's portability. They're small because it's a portable system. But apparently, Dad allegedly might have played some part in that decision. The game was first teased in September of 2019 with a video showing off both the ring con and the leg strap. Don't know why they made so much effort to show the leg strap. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. It's literally just a leg strap. There is no technology in it. The game itself would then be revealed the following week. And then I want to say like a week after that, it was like, yeah, it's in stores now. Go get it. It reviewed well when it released. It has a Metacritic currently sitting at 83. It was praised for its simple RPG mechanics that even casual players could understand, as well as how easy to understand it makes many of its various exercises, though I saw a couple of reviews that were like, but like the story's really lackluster, so if you're looking for more strategy and story, it's like, dude, it's an exercise game.
What do you think you're buying at that point?
Like, did you go into this thinking you were buying, like, Final Fantasy VI, but you fight by doing squats? No! It was never gonna be, like, I can't believe that even needed to be said.
The writing isn't as funny as I was hoping it would be.
I don't know, one of the things Ring can say is your sweat is so shiny and beautiful, and that makes me quite uncomfortable.
Whoa, now.
So, there was a clip of Vinny from Vinesauce playing Ring Fit Adventure, and Ring says that, and he just immediately yells, "No, don't say that!" Like it's a weird line. But hey, Ring Fit has sold really, really, really well. Within a week of being out in Japan, the game had sold over 68,000 copies, and for a game that you play by exercising, that ain't bad. 2.73 million copies had been sold worldwide by December of 2019, and the most recent numbers we have are that by March 2021, Ring Fit Adventure has sold 10.11 million copies.
Stop it. That's insane.
It has done incredibly well sales-wise, which was actually a problem for a little bit because when all of the fun of 2020 started up, you know the one, demand for both the Switch, due to a little game called Animal Crossing New Horizons, but also demand for Ring Fit Adventure as something people could use to exercise in their homes, seeing as gyms were not an option. This led to supply shortages. And as a result, scalpers began selling the game on sites like eBay for upwards of $300.
But
Hey, listener, don't buy things from scalpers. It should be noted that normally Ring Fit Adventure does cost a good $20 more than your average video game. That's $80. But don't pay $300 for Ring Fit Adventure. So, there are multiple people that worked on this game, but the first billing goes to a composer named Shinji Ushiroda. He began his career in the video game industry in 2000 when he joined Konami. It was really hard to find any information on what he did at Konami. As far as I could tell, he did various tracks for the Poppin' Music franchise, and also at one point did a song for Dance Dance Revolution, I guess. Very little that I could find. In 2007, he left Konami and then joined Nintendo in 2008, and he is still there. That is all the information I have for you. This man is a ghost, as is the case with a lot of Nintendo composers when they're not your Koji Kondos. A bunch of people that we have talked about have had this exact problem, which is weird because he has a long discography. His first game at Nintendo was Excitebot's Trick Racing. He also did a game called Through Space. He contributed to the soundtrack for Donkey Kong Country Returns, as well as Rhythm Heaven Fever, a game I've never heard of called Kiki Trick. He contributed to the soundtrack for Brain Age Concentration Training, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and Rhythm Heaven Megamix. I believe he is the main composer for Miitopia. And he is one of the people that worked on Ring Fit Adventure. He also has exactly one arrangement in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and that is the arrangement of Vampire Killer from the original Castlevania.
nice.
Again, even for the soundtrack, there's just no information. I couldn't even find, VGMDB doesn't list an official release for the soundtrack, so I couldn't even find who did each track.
Right.
That's how little information there was here. But alongside Ushiroda, there was also Shiho Fuji, who we talked about way back in episode 60 for her work on Animal Crossing City Folk, as well as Masa Miyoshi and the previously mentioned Asuka Hayazaki, previously known as Asuka Ota. Alright, that's 15 minutes. About time to get into the music, I guess. So let's talk about the soundtrack of Ring Fit Adventure, because that's why we're actually here, because this soundtrack is so surprisingly good. And we're going to start with critical track number 1, Title. I don't really know why I'm drawn to this song so much, but it's just it's really catchy, but it also has like this sort of low-key vibe to it because you haven't jumped into the game yet. You're not exercising yet. And yet at the same time it has this sort of ability to just sort of hype you and go like, all right, yeah, I can do this. We can do this. And that heavy drum and the clapping with it is just, it's a nice touch. I like this song a lot.
The rhythm it gets you going, especially with that drum, with that clapping, kind of makes you think that if you're going to have actions based on, rhythm or things that you'll have to do in a certain amount of time, it definitely kind of establishes that mindset early, gets your toes tapping. It's a neat piece. I think I'll reference it a couple more times, but this soundtrack really makes me think of Astrobot, specifically Astrobot Rescue Mission, especially when we get into some of like the more sampled, synthesized voice samples. So it's definitely reminiscent of that in a very good way.
Yeah, it's just a nice introduction to the overall vibe you're going to get from Ring Fit Adventure. But my favorite song on the soundtrack is actually Critical Track number 2. It is the one that I point to most often when I'm like, look how much higher above this game's weight limit it's punching. What is happening? Critical Track number 2 is In the First Place. This song goes way harder than it has any right to, frankly. This is just when you're moving at a good pace in some of the first levels of the game. That's all this is. And oh my god, this song is so good. It's got this driving rhythm to it, and just, everything about this song is way better than you'd expect from this weird exercise video game.
I think it's a great accomplishment when you're tackling a subject like exercise, and it's a difficult thing to do in the first place. It's not something that people want to stick with often, but when you make the experience so good orally, it creates a positive connection with the game experience, and I think it helps, with the interactivity along with it, but to have the music be this good so early on, this positive, creates a positive connection with playing the game. It doesn't make you, I would guess, dread the exercise.
Yeah, it feels upbeat and just really cool. Bravo on that, whoever composed this one. I don't know, because it won't tell me. But, yeah. Wow. The third critical track is one that you've probably heard if you've played literally any Ring Fit at any point, and that is Fit Battle. So if any song from Ring Fit shows up in Smash at any point, this is probably the one. This is the regular battle theme when you're just in a fight with regular enemies. And I really, really love the whistling, because I think they just give this fun, high-energy vibe that's just a lot of fun. But it's really catchy, and that's good, because you're going to hear this song a lot. And then there are those aforementioned vocal samples of, I think the guy's counting to 3? I can't tell, but I think that's what he's doing.
I have no idea what he's saying.
Yeah, I have no clue what any of the words in any of these songs are saying.
Is it like extra insert?
I have no idea. But like, even if you can't understand what he's saying, it still gives it that energy that just, it's really infectious and it's a lot of fun. And this is actually the song that led me to want to bring this game to the show, honestly.
It's super energetic, super fun. I think the voice sample does add a neat little wrinkle to it. But yeah, again, just a nice little positive piece here. I think this was the first one I heard when I was kind of flipping through. I'm like, what is the music in Ring Fit Adventure? And it's a good first one to get the first impression of. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, if any Ring Fit song shows up in Smash at any point, I would bet money on it being this one. Critical check number 4, though, the last two are boss fight themes. The first one is Versus Drago. My legs already hurt just hearing this song. Like, my knees are scared of what this means. But, like, this tone change is done so well because it's this sinister sounding guitar, and then you've got these distorted vocals still, and there's also, like, the slide synths and stuff. Drago's a really silly idea for a villain because he's literally just a bodybuilder that's like, oh, I gotta gain so many gains. And you're just beating him up somehow. And it's just goofy, but I think this finds a way to sort of give him an air of sinister feeling while also still sort of keeping we don't want it to sound bad. It's just, we still want you to be excited for exercising, but we need it to sound like there are stakes here. And I think this song does a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. With the electric guitar, to have a little bit more grunge to it, to have the slide synth to be like, whoa, like, you're not going to be on your total balance here. It's going to be tougher. I think that's a good way of kind of representing that through the music. And yeah, it still has good pace. It's, yeah, you're right. Not evil, not, dark and foreboding, but just enough to be like, yeah, you're right. There are stakes here. There is some tension.
This is going to be harder than what you have done. Drago in every world is the skill wall, I believe, where while you're playing, you do level up and you can earn new exercises and stuff to use as attacks as you level up. But like, Drago is one of those things where a lot of the time you may just get your ass handed to you very quickly. But you still get to keep that experience, and you still did the exercise even if he beats you. So, it's not all bad. But then we're going to add one word to that title to make it a completely different song. Critical check number 5 is Versus Dark Drago.
Let's just wait. Just wait. Cool, just wait. Just wait.
This song sounds like a Shin Megami Tensei boss fight theme. Like, not Persona, specifically an SMT boss theme. Which is really weird when you're thinking about how this is the theme where you do the final boss fight against big buff Dragon Man. But like, am I wrong to sort of have that feeling? Like, I could hear this in Soul Hackers.
Yeah, I think with even more guitar, even more synth kind of to it, that grunge in there, but then like you're adding more vocal samples. Like, you're just kind of cranking everything up here. I could totally hear it. You're right, not in a Persona necessarily, but an SMT. That sounds about right.
It reminds me a lot of some of the music I heard for the little time I put into Nocturne. Very, very similar to some of the stuff I heard there. So, I don't know. That one really stood out to me pretty much just for that reason. I mean, it's also the final boss theme, I think. I don't know. I've never seen it.
I would hope with Dark Drago.
Yeah, I would hope that's the final boss. I don't know if I will ever see this boss in real life myself, but we'll have to see. So for tracks on the cutting room floor, I got a couple. The first one is The Land of the Night. I kind of just like this one because there are like bits and pieces of chiptune in it that give it this nice retro theme that I don't feel like you hear anywhere else on the soundtrack. And it's just sort of neat. I like it a lot.
It's a definite mix-up of the kind of vibe that this game's going for, I think. It's just lighter, cooler. You definitely, with that, night in the title, I definitely can kind of picture like a nighttime environment, maybe, just to... It's not so bright and happy, but it's keeping the pace while being cooler.
I believe specifically this song plays in the night version of the levels where In the First Place would play.
Okay, that makes sense.
My second track on the cutting room floor is Fit Boss Battle. This one does some really cool things with the distorted vocals. I guess this is the music that plays when you fight a non-Drago boss. I didn't know there were those. This is how I found out. But this song is really, really weird and cool. I like this song a lot. All of those auto-tuned vocals are used to perfect effect in this song. It's great.
I really like it too, and I'll stress again, someone listened to the soundtrack to Astrobot Rescue Mission. It's like, it's right from there, and in a good way. In a good way. It sounds really nice.
So what will I never forget about Ring Fit Adventure? I gotta play it more. I really should play it more than I do. I don't think I've touched it since February. I should really probably play more Ring Fit Adventure. For my own sake.
I probably should exercise more, which may mean eventually getting Ring Fit Adventure. I would imagine stock's a better situation right now, I hope.
I think so. I think specifically Ring Fit, because I've seen multiple people nowadays be like, yeah, I just walked into a Target. It was just right there. So.
Right.
It's not as bad as the Switch still is, so there's at least that.
That's true. Or, like the PS5 or anything like that. But, something like Ring Fit Adventure, a new way of implementing motion control, just like at the time the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was. And, whether it's a more excitable rhythm-based soundtrack or the tip of before Nintendo turns to orchestration, these are great soundtracks. And I'm really glad we got to finally bring them to the show. It's a good one for sure. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but that's that MP3 podcast that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted, and you can find Original Soundchat and Smasherpieces on podcast services all around the globe. Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify. We have a feed for all of our episodes, but also a big Spotify playlist where if we cover a song from a video game on the show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to that playlist. Though, Joe, these are both first-party Nintendo games, I'm going to guess that they're not on Spotify.
You would have guessed correct.
Unfortunate. Maybe one day Nintendo will figure that whole thing out.
Maybe I could summon the World Ends With You soundtrack on Spotify through this. Square definitely won't do that. Nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Nudge.
Fingers crossed, maybe. Huh? Well, when you're done listening there, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with episodes? And also give us some suggestions for games that you'd like to see covered on the show, because that's one of our big goals for 2021 is including more of those games. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week is another one of my why the hell are you bringing this game to the show, Joe? I'll be talking about Alistair Lindsay.
That sounds like a fun time. I'll be talking about Kristen Naigus, and also another game that needed to be brought to the show. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So obviously I had to go find a remix of In the First Place, because that's the best song in the game. It's not surprising that there are very few remixes from this game. It's actually more surprising that there are any. Like, this is one of those where I figured I probably wasn't going to find one at all. But I did manage to find one by the YouTuber Gamliel Zafrana. That's GAMLIEL He did a remix of In the First Place that he refers to as Field Theme Remix, and it's pretty good, so please enjoy that.
It's definitely a fun one. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.